Turn on the audio. And now people should be able to hear us. Hello to the people in the chat.
Hello,
hey,
folks.
We actually have a few folks hanging out with us. It's not just Eric and I. Sometimes we can be awfully lonely on these Thursday evenings on the book club. So
we love having folks here.
All right.
Definitely.
So, yeah, should we go ahead and do our thing?
Sure.
All right. We're getting a little bit later start than usual. So.
Yeah.
It's already almost bedtime.
Sounds good on live stream. You remember to unmute yourself?
It should be good on the live stream. Everything on OBS looks like it's moving the way it should be. So, unless somebody watching us notices that they can't hear me, in which case you cannot hear me tell you to say something. So I guess, I don't know. We'll just never know.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, are you wearing an ampersand shirt today too? Did I see, Trace?
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, that's the other one from the fundraiser.
Yeah.
Eric is not a joiner. He does not fit in.
Nope, I have just a beaver.
Sorry. My regular gaming group is super full of innuendo, mostly led by the one woman of the group. She is the most innuendo-y person ever, and so we can't talk. I can't read box text without her bursting out into laughter. So when you talk about how I'm just wearing a beaver, she would absolutely die.
I think about it.
So
I was trying to be good.
That's what she says too. I'll have to tell her we talked about her.
All right.
All right.
Shall I start?
Well, why don't I hit record first, and then
all right. Oh,
and
yeah,
then figure out where the heck my script is. I really need to get a second screen. Maybe I'll use some of the Patreon money to get myself a second screen so I can track everything all at once. But all right, we are good to go.
Right. This episode of the Tome Show is brought to you by our super supportive patrons. You can join them over at patreon.com/The Tome Show. Welcome to the Tome Book Club for February of 2021. Wait, February?
Shh. It's still February. I swear we weren't delayed because I listened with a 9-year-old and we just didn't get the book read in time.
2021?
Feels like March.
Hey! I'm gonna take 2021. 2020 was not okay, and I am okay with. I'm not gonna relive it. No, we can be in 2021.
The Tome is a D&D news, reviews, and interviews show, and I'm your Tome host, Tracy Hurley.
And I'm Jeff Greiner. In each book club episode, we discuss one D&D related book. Spoilers be damned, in full book club style. Words are hard. And our book this time around is The Hammer of Thor by Rick Riordan. The Hammer of Thor on Thor's Day. We're recording on Thursday, so it's auspicious.
It is a sign. And with us, as always, is Eric Paquette.
Hello.
Eric, who is holding up the cover of the book for those folks who are joining us in the stream. So that is the extra excitement you get when you join us for the live recordings. You also get the unedited parts where I don't say words well, and that's fun too. Tracy and I cannot hold up the cover of the book because we both listen to it, so I would have to hold up my phone. And now everybody can read my notifications. So.
Yes, no, I got this.
Excellent radio.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Trace?
Excellent radio.
Yes.
All right. So, that's your part. I'm gonna be quiet.
Yeah, I'm blue. So our next episode, which we'll record towards the end of April, probably, we'll be reading The Sea of the Dead, The Ship of the Dead, by Rick Riordan, and Tome Show Book Club first. We aren't just dipping in and out of book series. We're gonna stay here till the conclusion.
Yep. We've decided as of, I guess, the last book choice when we went straight from book 1 into book 2 of this Magnus Chase series that we're just going to do that now. So I think maybe after we finish this series, we'll go back and finish some of the other series that we've started but never finished. So figure out what the heck is going on with all these other stories. Before we get started, though, I do want to say thank you to our Tome Show patrons. The Tome Show patrons, there are 29 of them, are some of the best people around, and I want to share my appreciation with them. You will notice that I am not going to be talking much about Amazon anymore for reasons that they never explained to me. They've recently canceled our status as an associate. So I can't share the Amazon affiliate gift cards that they sent every month with the contributors, which I always like to use to show appreciation for all the work that they do. Right now, the Patreon helps pay the bills and saves up a little bit. But if we can pick up enough extra patrons along the way, maybe I can try to, at least once a year, send some appreciation to all of the wonderful people who help make the show possible. All the hosts, all the editors that you may or may not ever hear from, the artists when we need to commission art, others. We've got Ishmael, our social media manager, who regularly appears on episodes. All of those people I like to show appreciation to. So if you want to help make that possible, come consider, if you can, if you are able to, hopping over to patreon.com/thetomeshow, become a patron, show your support, and I will love getting to a point where I can regularly sort of divvy that up and show appreciation to all of the people who make the show possible. Now, on to the book. We are talking about the Thor of Hammer. The Thor of Hammer? The Hammer of Thor. That makes more sense. Did I mention that words are hard? So, the Hammer of Thor. The second book in Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard? Okay.
That is correct.
The second book in Magnus Chase in the Gods of Asgard series, which is the 4th series in the sort of Rick Riordan-verse, right? There was the 2 Percy Jackson series and the Kane Chronicles, which is actually one of my favorites. And then this one, which happens kind of concurrently with another series, something like the Trials of Apollo or the Trial of Apollo or something like that. And we know it's happening concurrently because not only were they published sort of intermixed with each other, but there are characters that cross over from the two. Annabeth from the Percy Jackson series occasionally pops in and makes a cameo in the Magnus Chase books that we've read so far. And I do have to be extra careful because because it takes me a little longer because I'm listening to this on my commute with my youngest son. I went ahead and went straight from finishing book 2 into listening to book 3. So I'm already like 4 or 5 chapters into the next book. So I don't want to mix up what happens where. So
Spoilers be damned, but
spoilers be damned for this book. That's right. I don't want to spoil you for a book you may not have read yet. So, all right. So that's the book, right? This book is about Magnus Chase, Samir, Hearthstone, Blitzen, and Jack. That's sort of our party, right?
That's how it starts out, but we do get introduced to
Alex.
Alex.
Yeah, right. who is a new character, a new member of the party that joins in. So Magnus Chase is the son of Frey. Samir is a Valkyrie.
Loki.
Oh, and a daughter of Loki, yes. Alex, the new character, is a daughter of Loki. Hearthstone is an elf. And
Alex
What?
is, they are he or she, because they are gender fluid and
Yes.
non-binary, so daughter or
That's
son
right.
of Loki, depending on which way they are
nope,
presented.
you're right. Yeah, they mentioned at some point, and this may be not really a spoiler for the next book, but Magnus mentions at one point that they normally identify female, but not always.
Not all.
And in fact, there has been large chunks of what I've read so far where they identify as he. And somehow Magnus develops the magic power to be able to know how Alex is identifying at any given moment, even when Alex has to stop and think about it.
Yeah, at the end of the
Yeah.
of the book, Magnus goes to talk to Alex and refers to he, even though previously they were she, and then
Right.
during the conversation changes
Right.
the pronoun to she, and just realizing by via instinct, which I found was very cool.
And then I don't know if I mentioned Blitz. Blitz is the dwarf. So we got the crafter artificer character. We've got Hearth the wizard. Right? If we had to give them classes, what are they? Sam is the paladin, maybe. Magnus is a fighter.
I would say Alex would probably be the druid.
Oh, the shapeshifting. See, I was going to go rogue because she's or she, he, they, depending on the moment. They don't know. They just come off a little more clever, a little more sly.
Yeah.
So
could be multi-class.
And I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. They don't map necessarily to D&D, but so the whole shtick here is that Samir has been promised to marriage to an earth giant, which is particularly problematic, not only because she did not agree to be promised to marriage to the earth giant, but she's also already has an arranged marriage to somebody else.
Because Samara, she is Muslim, from what I recall. Does her mortal family have already made the arrangement for her to be with? And she actually likes the guy. So, but Loki decided to arrange a marriage with Thrym, son of Thrym.
Right.
Totally with her best interests at heart.
Of course, yes. Well, that's Loki.
Right.
I mean, Loki is the best parent there is. I mean,
it's interesting. It was interesting.
A
couple of weeks ago, I've been playing Descent into Avernus with my sons on Sundays. And a couple of weeks ago, they were given the task of freeing Kostachi, the demon lord, so that he would go after Zariel, who stole his hammer. And it specifically mentions in the book that Kostachi's hammer was crafted by none other than Thrym. And so my youngest was like, "Hey, we know that character. We know who Thrym is, right? Because of the listening to these books together." And it's assumed pretty much from go that Loki is manipulating things for his own benefit.
They sort of suspected that from the first.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is more like, okay, Loki's obviously up to something. What is it? But we still don't know, because it actually starts out by the fact that one of the, I believe it was Otis,
The
one
goats.
of the goats of Thor, coming to Magnus because the Thor's hammer, the
Right.
title of the book, it's still missing.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
oh, sorry,
The
I can't mention it.
we can't talk about it. We don't want the giants to find out, otherwise they'll attack.
But the giants are starting to
Right. The
suspect.
giants are starting to gather. They're starting to suspect. Thrym is expecting the. Thrym has the hammer. It is the traditional gift to the bride. The morning after the wedding, the bride receives the gift, and the gift for this wedding will be Thor's hammer. And they are sent off early on to what is basically a tomb full of whites, where they find the sword. Is it Sumabrander? No, that's Jack. The Skofnung sword.
It's Covenant sword.
Yeah. Tracy shakes her head to tell me I'm wrong, but she doesn't just speak up.
I give you a chance to
I
correct
appreciate
yourself.
that. So yeah, they get the Skofnung sword, which Jack tells us is a total hottie, and is also female.
And can't be unsheathed in
the presence of
cannot be unsheathed in the presence of a woman.
Talking about Jack, that's one thing that's a recurring thing is the fact that Jack has quite a social life and dates a bunch of weapons from the book.
Spoiler: this comes up again pretty early on in the next book as well. So.
And doesn't it require blood in order to sheath it again after you've taken it out?
Oh, I don't remember. That might have been a thing. That it can only be drawn when there's no women present, and that it can only be sheathed after it's drawn blood. Is that how it is? I kind of
think so.
I kind of vaguely recall, and it doesn't really play out as that important.
No, it doesn't play out as important on that. I mean, my favorite TV show had such a weapon. There was no specific, so it was just tradition, and the person who had it, when he drew it, went to resheet it, he would cut himself and then sheet it. So, which is like, okay, that's a way to do it. Painful, but hey.
Right. Okay.
So.
And doesn't it have a partner magical item?
It does.
Is not
but
there?
But do they know that yet? I'm trying to think of what happened after they went to the Barrow Whites. The Barrow Whites. I'm getting Lord of the Rings.
Well, basically, after they got it, because they were trying to get there.
Oh.
They found the Scotland because they wanted to get Thor's hammer. They didn't know that at that point in time. And that's Loki appeared.
With Uncle Randolph.
He says that the sword and the whetstone will be the Sam's bride.
Right, but then they guarantee they force them to go and recover the stone by Randolph shoving the sword through the chest of Blitzen, and Blitzen is going to die, and they have the brilliant idea of let's drag Blitzen out into the yard before he dies because dwarves turn to stone in sunlight. And so then he turns to stone and they figure, okay, now we've got a chance to heal him. But the only way to heal him is with the Skofnung stone, which is the whetstone that can sharpen the Skofnung blade. And it just so happens that Hearthstone's dad has the Skofnung stone. And so we're going to get to find out about Hearthstone's sort of background. Hearthstone is not just an elf and not just the sort of party runecaster wizard, but Hearthstone is also deaf. And that becomes pertinent as we get into his background, because he's always sort of been an exile from his family, Tracy, you look like you want to say something.
Before we go there, we should talk about the Democratic plates or the
yes. Tell us about that, Trace.
So they're Vikings. I forget exactly who they are though. Prince something or other. Caught in the
the one guy was some sort of
now
royalty, prince or king or whatever. But
yeah, they're now kind of like zombies. I couldn't remember if they're quite zombies or quite truly whites, but they all do everything by Robert's Rules of Order,
right.
and and they have to vote on what they do, and they have to follow the rules.
So they had to have a quick discussion, debate, vote before they could agree to fight and try to kill our party of heroes.
Which our heroes uses to their advantage. It's by time.
So yes, then they decide to head off to recover the Skofnung stone in order to save Blitz. They lose... Alex isn't with them yet. And they lose Sam. Because it's just Magnus and Hearth. And then they have stoned Blitzen with them.
Yeah, because they have to go back to Boston via plane. And isn't that when we meet Sam's intendant?
Well, we met him in book 1.
Really, him, I guess.
Yeah.
And flight instructor.
Yeah, because there was a whole thing about him being exposed to all the craziness of... Oh, that you're right. Because that's how they get to... I forget the pronunciation or what the name of the elf world is, but they get there by jumping out of the plane.
Yeah.
Elfheim. That's such a hard name to remember. So we meet him, and so she goes with him, and they jump out of the plane to go to Elfheim. And they end up in the middle of the elven world, but the elven world has basically lost sight of all the magic. Like, so far as we know, our character, Hearth, is the only one who had enough interest in old elven magic that they've learned how to start using the runes to use magic again. All the other elves they're basically just, haughty urban humans, right?
Yeah.
And so they get arrested and by officer like Morning Glory or whatever his name is, and because they have, of course, still elfy names, and taken to Hearth's dad's estate.
Great Gatsby.
Kind of, yeah. And we get this whole backstory for Hearth. How about somebody else tells us the backstory for Hearth so I don't have to talk the whole time? People get tired of hearing from me.
Do you want to do it, Eric? Or?
I do it because I don't quite remember the full details.
I'm not going to remember all of the details because
it's
probably been a month since I finished
here to jump
it.
in.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so Hearth was there, I guess, the day that his brother died? Is that part of what you're talking about? Like, they were very young. Hearth couldn't hear the cries from his brother. I forget what exact magical creature basically took his brother out. And his dad in particular, and I think some to degree his mom, has blamed Hearth ever since. And so in order to get back into the good graces of his family, he has to pay, the price or something like that they call it?
Which is a term I'm only familiar with because I've listened to a bunch of Dresden Files books, and it comes up in there a lot.
Right. And so he has to fill a rug. Oh, sorry, what?
Yeah, the Wergild's the man price.
Yeah. And thus he has to fill this rug full of
it's the skin of the creature that killed his brother, and he has to basically every time he does good things or does chores or whatever around the house or whatever, he gets a certain amount of gold, and he just keeps having to earn it and earn it and earn it until he has completely covered every hair on the rug. No part of the rug can be visible. And if he misbehaves, he loses coins. And so, of course, he barely has anything there, and he's been indebted for his whole life.
Right, or heck, needs a meal.
Yeah, there's like a big, long, I don't know, I envision it like a big chalkboard on the wall with all of the different things, all the different ways that he can earn and lose money from his Verguild.
And basically, ever since the thing happened, that had become his life, because that's basically all you see in his room.
Right.
When they walk in is stuff dealing with that and just the heavy price he paid for that day.
Until eventually he just skipped town and left, and that's when he ran into I guess that's when he ran into Mimir, who then put him onto Magnus that we learned about in the first book.
Right. And so his dad says, in order to get the whetstone, two things have to happen. He has to fulfill his obligation with the Wergild, and then Magnus has to go to parties
until it's paid off. Yeah.
Until it's paid off, and make his dad.
Well, and it's tricky as well, because all of the treasure that he earns to pay off the Wergild has to be done on his father's property. Like, he can't leave and go somewhere else and get the treasure and bring it back. And so that becomes problematic until they figure out that there is a being on the property hiding in a like a pond or by a waterfall or whatever it is. And I forget, it's a dwarf. It was a dwarf that's been hiding it.
A disguised dwarf.
Disguised dwarf who's legendary for having all this treasure. And they believe it's hiding on the property. So that's the only way to do this, but you got to deal with this dwarf. And that's also when we find out that when they go out to the pond, that we find out, because they stop by the well where his brother died, we find out that his set of runes that he uses to do magic is missing one rune that has been left behind sort of in memory of his brother. But then we also learn later on that no set of runes is as powerful as it can be when it's incomplete. So if he had that rune in his set of runes, all of his magic would be more powerful. But he doesn't want it yet. I forget what the rune was. It was the rune of something, but regret or inheritance or something like that.
Yeah. He does get a new set of runes, which are an upgrade from what I recall. But it's still missing that one rune. And
he gets that. He gets a new set later. Yeah.
Later.
So they go to the pond. They find the dwarf who's hiding at the bottom of the pond in the form of a fish, which they are eventually able to figure out because was it with one of his runes? Hearth uses magic to basically, pick up all the water or evaporate all the water, blast it with lightning or something like that, as I recall. And then Magnus finds that his healing abilities kind of extend out, and he has this sort of low-level psychic ability, and is able to figure out that one of the fishes was thinking in English, basically, and that must be the one. And so they capture him, they get his treasure, and they learn, or Magnus learns, that there is a curse associated with the treasure, specifically with the ring included in the treasure. And that eventually, it's like this guy's treasure gets stolen. It's just part of his story, right? His treasure gets stolen. They whoever steals it wears the ring. The ring is cursed. And so they end up losing all the treasure shortly thereafter. But they decide that they're willing to deal with the consequences because they don't need the treasure for very long. They need it for long enough to cover this rug and move on to save their friend.
Yeah. Well, technically, they are losing the treasure by giving it away to.
And as I recall,
so.
the dad ends up taking the ring, doesn't he?
Well, when they put all of the treasure on the rug, there is one hair that still sticks up. And thus the ring gets added to the treasure.
And that finishes it off. And then Dad takes all the treasure, including the ring. And Hearth is like, you got to watch out. You know that ring is cursed. And Dad's all arrogant and greedy and takes it anyway. And then they still have to fulfill the obligation of the party. But of course, the party ends up being... a bit of a betrayal, a trap.
It's a trap.
But long story short, I guess they escape. They get the stone. They fix Blitzen.
Yeah, they kill him. They escaped him. And then they return back to Midgar.
That's right.
And go see Alex and Sam.
Yes.
Where they go to visit.
This when they go to
Heimdall.
Heimdall? Okay.
Yeah. To basically be able to find Udgar.
Yeah, which is another one of those moments where they describe a very specific location where they're hanging out and where they find Heimdall. And I thought to myself, it's been a long time since I've been to Boston. I don't know any of what they're talking about, but I bet local folks are familiar with these landmarks. Is that true, Tracy? You used to live there.
Yeah, and I just don't remember with this exact one, but I didn't go bowling very much. Because that's what we're talking about now, right?
Yeah, the bowling alley.
Was it a bowling alley?
Well, I think it was a bowling alley. For Heimdall?
I just remember they were on top of something and there was neon signs and stuff, and then they looked up and there was the Rainbow Bridge. There's definitely... I don't remember it being a bowling alley. I'm sure you remember.
Oh, wait. You're talking first about the Rainbow Bridge, which was near Fenway.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
I thought so, but I could be wrong.
So they meet Heimdall. And Samir's betrothed is there as well.
Yes.
Because they're dealing with the fact that when mortals are exposed to this kind of stuff in a way that their brain can't just sort of deny it, because normally people just ignore craziness going on, they just don't notice it. But when they can't ignore it, like what he's going through, oftentimes their brains have to sort of bend to absorb it, or they break and they go crazy. And they managed to keep him from going crazy, in part, it seems, because of Magnus's sort of healing abilities. Sort of help keep him stable.
Since son of Frey, who's a healing god, is able to use that to protect the throne.
So they meet Heimdall on the what I've always called Bifrost, but in the audiobook they pronounce Bifrost.
I've always read it as Bifrost. But...
Right, there was a few pronunciations where I'm used to Marvel comics and movies, and so I pronounce them one way, and then they're pronouncing them other ways, and I'm like, oh, now I want to know if I just didn't know, or that they messed up. I don't know, because they say Bifrost, and they say Thor's wife is Siv, not Sif. They pronounce it like a V, so that was new to me as well.
Seems makes sense from what I understood of the Nordic languages.
Sure, I don't know.
I don't know.
So Heimdall is not at all like the Marvel movies. He is not Idris Elba. He's really into taking selfies and posting on social media and doing all those awesome things, right?
Yep. He's very much into connecting people and looking at. See, when you can look at anything, might as well just go to all the social media.
Right. So they are able to, from him, figure out that Mjolnir is not, must be buried somewhere deep underground, basically, because Heimdall can see anywhere in the 9 worlds unless it's 8 miles underground or more. So the hammer must be buried deeper than 8 miles underground because that's the only place that Heimdall can't see it.
So they figured that only basically a Nerf giant would be able to do that, like Thrym.
And this is when they end up working their way towards the bowling alley, right?
Yeah, they were doing it. I think Ulfgar Loki is found at the bowling alley.
They're looking for Uthgard Loki, who is not Loki. It is a giant who happens to have the name Loki, just like Loki does, because Loki is just a name.
Yeah. And Loki's also half
True.
giant, so hey.
But I forget, what are they looking for? What do they want Uthgard Loki for? Do you remember, Eric? Or Tracy? I forget what the whole point of even going to the bowl. It was an interesting and fun scene, but I don't remember why they went.
Maybe wasn't Ulfgar Loki the one who knew information, so they were trying to find where Thrym was?
Maybe. It was. I think it was an information gathering task.
Yeah.
Was it to find the location of the wedding? But they were just waiting for the invite to eventually update.
Maybe because they have invites to the wedding, and the location, the date keeps changing, or at least how long it is. Like in so many days, and then it counts down. It changes, but then it also says that the location wouldn't be announced until like the day of.
Oh.
So it just says TBA or whatever until the day of. It'll tell you where to go. In any case, they go to the world of the giants to look for Uthgard Loki, and they run into a giant named Tiny. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Something to that effect. A giant who's turns out to be one of the runts of the giants, who agrees to basically to afford them guest rights, to invite them to the bowling alley, if they carry his bowling bag to the bowling alley.
Yes, which Blitz.
Yeah.
Blitz helped.
Right. So the bowling bag is way too big, and as I recall, Hearth is not with them at this point, so they don't have magic to use. But Blitz knows apparel. So he treats it like an accessory. He uses Jack to fly around and weave runes into it. Alex is with them, by the way, at this point from the Heimdall meeting on.
Because the bag is not finished and it does not have a name, and all prevent items need a name.
Right, and so he's going to weave some runes into it, sew some runes into it in order to finish it, to name it, but also, as it's being finished, add some properties to it, such as the ability to make it shrink and grow to full size. With the ever so clever password of password. So they're able to show up to the bowling alley. They present the bowling bag to Tiny, and they're effectively given a series of challenges to complete in order to prove their worth, survive the encounter, get the information they need, whatever. And there are a series. This actually, so 2 summers ago, I listened to Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology book.
We did that for this.
Okay. So and there was the story in there that talked about sort of Thor dealing with shape-changing giants and having to overcome these challenges, including like drinking the endless mead horn and whatever. And then they actually reference that in this bit, right? They were doing these challenges, and they're like, you all handle this a lot differently than the gods normally do. Thor shows up and we give him a challenge, and he just tries to drink the entire ocean. And I'm like, hey, I know that story. We read that. So,
Same here, yeah.
Yeah.
but they overcome the challenges by recognizing that there's tricks and finding ways to basically cheat, which is exactly what the giants would have done.
What? Giants don't cheat.
So they actually earn.
They just get creative
Right. Well,
with
and
the rules.
that's more or less how they justified it here, right? They got creative with the rules, and they managed to win the challenges, the various challenges, and as their reward, they get like a 5-minute conversation with Utgard Loki, who totally wanted to help them but couldn't lose the respect of his people by just giving them what they want. So they get 5 minutes, and they're like, 5 minutes? Yeah, 5 minutes. It's not like they're not going to kill you. You successfully completed the challenges, so you get to talk to me for 5 minutes before they rush out of the bowling alley to kill you. And so, yeah. So Uthgard Loki drops some knowledge on them. I don't actually even remember exactly what they learned.
Basically, where Thrym is, also the fact that part of the bride that the sword is to be given to Loki as the bride
as
price,
the father of the bride, yeah.
And thus the sword can be used to cut and free Loki from where he is.
But they also figure out that he needs the stone because cutting through Loki's bonds would destroy the blade. But with the stone, you can sharpen the blade to cut the rest of the bonds. Yeah. And this is where it becomes obvious that as much as it felt like Rick Riordan had perhaps diverged a little bit from the formula that he tends to use for every single one of his stories, this is where it became more clear that no, he just didn't make it clear through the first book what the big bad threat was. But really, he's still following the exact same formula. I don't know if Tracy, have you read other Rick Riordan books? Okay.
I don't believe so.
I know Fred is a fan, but I didn't know if you had.
So,
Have you read him, Eric?
Nope. This is my first series by Rick Riordan.
Well, the shtick is you've got some sort of magical, usually half-god teenager who goes off to a sort of mundane place full of other half-god teenagers to learn about who they are and what their abilities are. They sort of spend the first part of the story learning about themselves and learning about this larger sort of apocalyptic threat that could end all of civilization. They spend the middle part of the story trying to stop the threat from being let loose and starting the apocalypse. And ultimately, and this is why the way this book goes, we're spoilers be damned anyway, but we've all read the book. But this is why by the end of the book, I was absolutely not shocked in any way, shape, or form that Loki was set free, because that's how literally every Rick Riordan book works. Is there's a big apocalyptic threat that's trapped, trying to get free, and ultimately by the end of the middle of the story, whether it's 2 books in or 1 book in or 3 books in, because the series are different lengths, eventually the big bad gets out, and then the next book then it becomes, or the next part of the story becomes, okay, now how do we set things right again?
Isn't that just Norse?
Well, then that's a lot of story, but not necessarily. I mean, it's real. Like every single story follows the same pattern. So if he did it once, it wouldn't stand out to me. But every single story follows this pattern.
Oh no! I was just suggesting that maybe it blends in even more though with these books, because a lot of the stories from that Neil Gaiman book were like that. It's like this apocalyptic thing is about to happen. Oh, they're may be able to unwind most
Well,
of it.
yeah,
At the end.
and I mean, even my understanding of Norse mythology is that even when Ragnarok, which is sort of their apocalypse, happens in Norse mythology, it's still not the end. It's just the end of sort of that age, and then they continue on, and the cycle starts anew.
Yeah.
So who knows if that's where this will go in the end? But this Norse mythology particularly lends it well to the formula that Rick Riordan uses over and over again. Setting aside the Hotel Valhalla as opposed to, because Magnus goes to a hotel to learn about his abilities and hang out with his kind, whereas Percy Jackson goes to a summer camp to hang out with other demigods and learn about his powers. And I think in the Kane Chronicles, I think they maybe hang out in a library or something. It's some other sort of similar thing. It's a little different because there's not others of their kind, and they're not demigods. They're like descended from Egyptian wizards or whatever. But that's one of the reasons I like the Kane Chronicles, because it actually diverges from what you expect necessarily. There's still a lot of like, oh no, the apocalypse is going to happen. Oh no, it actually happened. And then they have to make it right again. But
lots of myth have apocalypse situations to
Sure.
be able to end the myth and try to.
But in the
prevent or-
stereotype sort of story, the good guys stop the apocalypse from happening, but that's never what happens in a Rick Riordan book. So.
But yeah, no. So after learning this from Ulfgar Loki, and that's where they decide to actually, they're going to, in order to get the hammer and stop the invasion of the giants and all, they actually have to go through the wedding. The only problem is that Sam doesn't want to go through the. She doesn't. She said she's already been doing that. She will. She even told Loki.
And she actually she swore an oath or a promise to her betrothed that she would not go through with the wedding.
Yeah.
Even to pretend, yeah.
Yeah, she won't. So
they take a page out of Loki's book.
Yeah.
Right?
They do.
They take a page out of Loki's book.
Yes.
To deal with the ridiculousness that Loki.
But before this, is this where they stop at Magnus's uncle's house and they find the picture of Bridal Veil Falls?
At some point
I don't remember exactly
when.
But at some point they do, and they find this picture of Bridal Veil Falls that Magnus's uncle has like marked in some way, and they think that maybe the uncle is trying to give them a hint that that's the location of where they're gonna enter to the wedding. Because the issue they learn is not that they don't know where the entrance is; it's that the entrance to the location keeps moving, and so that'll be where it is on wedding day. So yes, now it's time to. They've got the information. They know what needs to be done, and they think they know where it's going to be. Now it's time to put together a plan, and to do that, they're going to need help. So,
but yes, as you said, Tracy, they take a page from Loki's playbook, and they have Alex, who will pretend to be Sam.
Oh, in fact, it wasn't even. That's how they escaped the giants, wasn't it? The giants were going to kill him from the bowling alley, and they escaped because Siv opened like a doorway in a tree, and they escaped into Asgard from Siv, and from there they concocted this plan of Alex taking the form of Sam, and Sam being sort of the bridesmaid or whatever. They're all going to be wearing veils, so that'll help with the disguise. And then, of course, they work out with Thor because it's Thor's house. What was Thundercrack? Is that what the name of the place was? Thor's home. It was something crack. Bright Crack. The name of Thor's home is Bright Crack, which it took me a minute to figure out that. Oh, it's a reference to lightning. Lightning looks like a bright crack.
Yeah.
I just thought somebody's pants were hanging low and they didn't have a lot of sun.
So yeah, with saved. How about that? Basically, Alex and Sam get makeovers to be able to be ready for the wedding.
And Thor is going to gather up the Aesir, the gods, and they're going to sort of hang out by Bridal Veil Falls and sneak in, all stealthy like, for the wedding to be like commandos. And Hearth and Blitz go take the World Tree back to Valhalla to gather up all of their friends. And man, did this book in some ways just absolutely follow the formula of the first book, right? Big Bad's gonna escape. We need to stop Big Bad from escaping. Now go gather up all of our friends that we've basically ignored since the beginning of the book to show up and be our army.
It's the Norse way. I mean, it is like, oh look, Armageddon's going to happen, so the Battle of the Enihar or can come in and fight this big huge battle.
Although I feel a little bit bad for all the Inheri, right? Because they seem to be interesting characters with interesting personalities, and we get to sort of meet them all at the beginning of each book, and then they show up at the end of the book to sort of fight the battles for them, and we don't see or hear much of anything in between.
Yeah.
So they gather up their plan. They get Thor, they get their allies, their commando allies, and they know where they're going to go and how they're going to make sure that Sam can not break her vows. But ultimately, I guess it doesn't really even matter to Loki, right? Because Loki doesn't actually need it to be Sam. He just needs it to be one of his children.
Yeah. So that way the sword can be given to him.
And so having it be Alex or Sam isn't really important. Loki is 3 steps ahead of everybody else, as Loki tends to be, right?
Yeah. But it sort of matters for Thrym. They don't like to be tricked, even though they know that Loki will trick them. So,
although Thrym's sister doesn't care.
Yeah, Thrym's sister doesn't care.
Well, and ultimately, it turns out Thrym doesn't care for very long. Because the whole wedding sort of goes sideways, right? They manage to get everybody into Bridal Veil Falls. That is the location. They get all the people in, but there are wards set up so the Aesir cannot enter. And so they're looking around thinking, did Thor and the other gods sort of sneak in? But the door was barely open, and they're not sure what's going on. They go down for the wedding. They sort of delay for as long as they can. They make sure the hammer is around, etc. And then, like a tunnel opens up in the cave that they're in, basically, because they're in the Loki needs to be there in person, so they're actually doing the wedding in the hidden chamber where Loki has been tied up. Right, Loki's been imprisoned since who knows how long, and this is part of Norse mythology that Loki is sort of tied up with the intestines of one of his own children, with a snake constantly dripping. So it comes off as like acidic venom, but this venom is constantly dripping in his face, torturing him, and that's sort of where Loki's been for centuries or longer. And so they have the wedding there so that Loki can actually be physically in attendance. The Inheri with Blitz and Hearth actually show up first, and the battle sort of begins. And then eventually Thor and the gods show up, and they bring the god of vengeance, who's got like the shoe made from the remnants of every shoe that's ever existed that he just uses to stomp everything. And so then, so battle ensues. The bad guys are defeated, whatever. But while the fight is happening, Magnus's uncle Randolph takes the Skofnung sword cuts the bonds of Loki, uses the stone to resharpen it, cuts the other half of the bonds from Loki, and Loki escapes. So Loki is escaped, and Loki disappears, and the gods don't even pursue. Oh, we'll get him, no big deal, because that's sort of the Thor way, right? And that's more or less how the story ends, right?
It's,
Did I miss anything?
the Magnus and his hallmates gather up basically after that because Randolph is killed off by the sword, the spirit of the sword. But the mortals and go back to Hotel Valhalla. They celebrate their glorious battle, and then Magnus, Alex, and Sam are pulled aside by Heigl, where they are given their next. Well, Sam is given her next mission, which is recapture Loki.
Right, and ultimately, the way it works out, they've got time, because for Loki to sort of start Ragnarok and begin the end of the world, he has to sail his. Was it the ship of nails? Is that what it was?
The ship of nails, the Nagflar.
Yeah, the ship that's made out of all of the like clippings of people's nails that have collected over time, and so it gets bigger and bigger with time and whatever. But it is frozen in the ice between different worlds right now, and so they have to wait until midsummer, or Loki has to wait until midsummer when his ship will be freed from the ice to really begin the end of the world. And so they have until midsummer to prepare and to help or to try to find Loki.
Yeah. Which is at that point where Magnus contacts his cousin, Annabeth.
Right.
Because he needs the help of her boyfriend, Percy Jackson.
Right.
Which
because if you know any of the Percy Jackson stories, Percy is a demigod and his father is Poseidon. So if you're going to have to go on a sea voyage, get help from a sea demigod.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's more or less the story, right? Did we miss anything? Any particular thoughts that we thought were interesting or particularly D&D-ish to us?
Well, the whole quest of going to one place to get something and then no, you have to go next. No, that's very, very.
Sure.
You see a lot in adventures where you have the A, B, C, D quests.
Mm-hmm. And I mean they've formed by this point, and really by partway through the first book, they form a proper party.
Yeah.
And so although they don't stick with the party, they split the party a lot.
Yes, which is not really D&D, but it works.
Sure. I mean, it takes Rick Riordan books take a much more a lighthearted approach to all the references, the modern references, and the goofiness and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun for a book to read, but I don't know that I would want to inject it into my game. But there's also a lot of there's still a lot of things that could easily be stolen and put into a D&D game that I think would work really well. A lot of the mythology and the way they've reworked it and all of that. I think there's a lot of cool ideas here.
And there are games that do like to be like that.
There are.
Like mine.
Yeah, my games too. We like to be lighthearted and just make jokes and just reinsert it in there. There's also some classic D&D adventures. I mean, the classic Castle of Greyhawk has lots of pop culture references in there, like the Amazing Drider Man.
Right.
Or
I mean, there are certainly I have certainly built games that have, and my last campaign in North Carolina was a post-apocalyptic fantasy Earth. So they would occasionally run it. A dungeon would be made out of an old warehouse with shipping containers all over the place, full of movie props or gimmicky sort of things that were being shipped or whatever, right? So that's always kind of fun to do. But I don't know that I would ever Like, I don't know that I would ever want a goofy Heimdall that doesn't take anything seriously and just wants to take selfies all the time. That may be a bridge too far for most of my games anyway, unless we specifically built it to be sort of that goofy, silly game, in which case I usually only do those for short runs, not long campaigns.
Well, my current 13th age group, when they were at a ceramic shop, they own a bar, and it's a sequel to a D&D 4th edition campaign, but they found a ceramic knight statue, and they brought it so they could hold a picture and all that at that bar, and they call them server. So that's the level of like silliness
Right.
that we have.
Sure.
So.
Sure. I mean, honestly, I'm a little surprised, given that was it one of you all, or was it Fred maybe, that had mentioned last time when we chatted about the first book that Rick Riordan is a big D&D fan, which I hadn't known before. Given that, and given the kind of world he's created and the characters he's created, I'm kind of surprised there's not an RPG. There's not a world of Percy Jackson RPG out there.
Yeah.
It seems like the kind of thing.
Yeah,
that
I had
totally
done the research.
You had?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
There are games that are out there that exist. Like there is a PIP system game which is family friendly, which is called Camp Myth, where it is a summer camp and you play mythological creatures. So that exists. So there are games that are out there that can possibly recreate part-time gods also.
And you know what? I bet you could, if you took it less seriously, you could rip off the systems from Theros and very easily do a sort of recreation of these kinds of stories or in this world. I'm gonna have to give it a shot sometime, because both of my kids have read those books with me now at this point, so, or at least some of them. I'm the only one who gets to hear all the books, but my kids get to hear bits and pieces as well.
From a classic D&D setting, Planescape, where you travel along the plains and all that, can easily recreate a game like Percy Jackson and all that, where look, you're so instead of Hotel Valley, you're in Sigil, the city of doors, where you can go to which way. So.
All right. Any other last thoughts?
I think it did a good job highlighting different gender identities and also how easily they can fit in to particularly at least North myths and probably some other stuff.
Yeah. Because for Alex, like for Sam, Loki is her dad, but for Alex, Loki is the mom.
And also, Alex is themselves gender fluid, and I feel like Rick Riordan has gone out of his way to have representation in this series that he didn't have in the other series, in terms of people with disabilities, gender fluidity. I'm trying to think. I don't know that there's a lot of in the other books that there's a lot of racial diversity in these books. I mean, the Kane Chronicles is they're descended from Egyptians, so there's clearly some Middle Eastern heritage there. But it's also the only mythology that's not based out of Western civilization, although it's kind of a Western take on Egyptian mythology. So I think it'll be interesting to see if Rick Riordan ever expands out to other cultures, to non-Western perspectives. But given what he's doing, he's at least making some efforts to have some representation that honestly is probably more rare than racial diversity in a lot of the fiction that I've read. So.
But I was thinking a bit when you were talking about the NER, that we see them briefly at the start and then we see them basically at the end. From a game perspective, you could have that as you introduce them as that resource that they have. Oh, and then at the end of this story, when you really need at this epic battle, they cash it in, and then they get to use calling the troops. So
Tracy, what did you think of the reader for the audiobook? It was a different reader than the first book.
It was. And which one is it?
This was Kieran Culkin. This is Macaulay Culkin's brother.
Yeah, I was like, I know it's the brother, but
it's Kieran Culkin, and it threw me. I got used to it eventually, but I liked the reader for the first book, and I wasn't sure why they changed.
Yes.
And then for the third book, they go back to the reader from the first book. And so, just as I got used to Kieran Culkin, they switched it again. So, because honestly, like, I wasn't sure that I liked his voice after I got used to the other reader. But then I got to a point where, I don't know, maybe halfway through or so, where I started recognizing, like, there was some particular sort of actor-like choices being made to help tell the story that I thought actually were really good.
right.
And now we're back to the other reader, and he's not doing that. So,
right.
Anyway, I was curious because the reader particularly stood out for me because it's a little bit more celebrity reader and one with some acting background, although he's never a huge actor, right? But
right.
All right. Well, I think we're done. Is that fair to say?
that sounds fair to
All
say.
right, then we are done. It is time to say goodbye. We want to say thank you to all of our patrons at patreon.com/The Tome Show and anyone else who otherwise supports and adds to our community.
And if you'd like to contact us, you can send us an email, thetomeshow@gmail.com. You can call our biz line, 919-BIZ-TOME. That's 919-BIZ-TOME. You can find me on Twitter at Sarah Darkmagic. That's Sarah with an H. And at sarahdarkmagic.com. Find Jeff at Squatch, SQUACH. Eric is at Eric MPAC, ERICMPAQ. And the show is at The Tome Show. You can find us on Facebook, Patreon, and Discord. We post it occasionally, the link to Discord. But if you want it, please don't hesitate to ask. And you can watch a stream of our episodes, twitch.tv/Tome Show, or watch the video after the fact on the Tome Show's YouTube channel. Show notes and other great shows at thetomeshow.com.
And I actually just changed, as one of the bookkeeping things I was doing before we started recording tonight, I just changed our profile on Twitter so that it has the links to the Patreon and to the Discord, the permanent link to the Discord. So hopefully we can keep that community and that conversation going. But in any case, that is our thoughts on the Hammer of Thor. Up next in April, we are going to be reading The Ship of the Dead by Rick Riordan, the third and final book of the Magnus Chase series. Until then, keep turning the page, Tomites. The end of the show. Stop yawning.
Sorry.
None of that.
I'm sorry.
I do that to my students too. They'll yawn in the middle of class. No, none of that. No yawning. And
Yeah, it's just not today. I had 2 hours, but the 2 days before it was 3 to 4 hours of visiting hours with my mom in the hospital. So
should I turn off the stream?
Just a little.
Okay.
Sure.
I didn't know if you wanted to talk about stuff with your mom or not, but
Oh, it's okay. Bye, stream.
Bye, stream.
Bye.